We need to talk about Mason Greenwood. After doing everything in his power to derail his career, he's beginning to take center stage again in France after becoming the top scorer in Ligue 1. With this second chance, he's been undeniable, proving to be one of the best attackers. Wait, second chance? The same guy who got caught in 4K assaulting his girlfriend and everyone knows about it? Oh, well, it must have been one of those AI videos, right? Wait, it wasn't? The girlfriend posted it? Well, in that case, people have to be outraged, and he'll never see a football pitch ever again. Come back to Manchester, my sweet prince? Oh god, how did we get here? Greenwood joined Man United's academy at just 6 years old, where he quickly impressed coaches. Even from a young age, his ability on the ball and speed while taking on defenders were unguardable at times, and this quickly shot him up the ranks at the academy as he grew older. By the time he was a teen, he was already playing for the U18 team despite being many years younger than the rest of his teammates. And he wasn't just playing with them, he was carrying them. He became the top scorer of the U18 Premier League North, scoring 17 goals in 21 games. This led to a call-up for the England under-18s, where he continued his red-hot form, winning the ICGT Cup and being named player of the tournament. Greenwood was promptly called up to the first team under Solskjaer in the 2019-20 season. He was brought into the first team in their Europa League matches and immediately forced his way into the starting 11, scoring 4 goals in the group stage. He was an electric, rapid, goal-scoring winger who terrorized fullbacks. People were already calling him a Rashford regen, saying that he had the potential to carry Man United to glory in a way that Marcus never could. And mind you, this was being said after just 6 or 7 games with him in the starting 11. But yes, he was that good. And by his 20th birthday, he was reaching his best form, having scored 32 goals for the club, with only Norman Whiteside and George Best scoring more for the Reds as teens. The sky was the limit for this youngster, proving himself on the biggest stage in the most difficult league in the world. Man United fans were beaming and full of hope for the future of their club, but as fast as Greenwood rose to stardom, his downfall was even more swift.
I should politely and you wouldn't do it, so what else would you want me to do? Use your f***ing legs up!
Mason!
Shut up!
On January 30th of 2022, Greenwood was arrested under suspicion of assault, rape, and controlling or coercive behavior. The evidence was glaring and public after his partner released multiple photos and video evidence of her sustained injuries, allegedly from Greenwood, although the timeline was uncertain. But what was certain was that the English winger was an abuser, and he'd just been put on blast for the whole world to see.
I listened to the audio, I looked at the photos, they look horrific.
I think that's absolutely disgraceful.
I woke up this morning, and I'm sure many of you woke up this morning, to very disturbing pictures and recordings. There is very serious allegations, and if these allegations are true, game over is what I would say.
Mason Greenwood will not return to training or play matches until further notice.
After being on trial for over a year, the charges were mysteriously dropped in February 2023 due to the withdrawal of key witnesses and new material that came to light, meaning that the victim, Haley, was no longer pressing charges. Shocker, the man who was arrested under suspicion of coercion and controlling behavior was once again controlling or coercing women. Mason hadn't seen the pitch during this time, of course, and no one heard a peep from him while the investigation was ongoing, which is to be expected. One of the only public statements he made after the charges were dropped was, "I was brought up to know that violence or abuse in any relationship is wrong. I did not do the things I was accused of. I fully accept I made mistakes in my relationship, and I take my share of responsibility for the situations which led to the social media post." Although he was technically a free man, the club still needed to take obvious actions in response to the shocking and damning evidence that had been posted on Instagram. But Manchester United's response was messy, to say the least. After the charges were dropped, CEO Richard Arnold's first instinct was to allow the player to return to the club. They allegedly conducted an internal investigation using key evidence that wasn't available to the public. What evidence could have possibly been given to them to explain those pictures and voice recordings? Did Greenwood have an evil twin we didn't know of? The club issued an official statement claiming that they have responsibilities to Mason as an employee, as a young person who's been with the club since the age of 7, and as a new father with their partner. So, in other words, they were prepared to not only ignore his past of physical and sexual abuse, but they were prepared to defend him. And this, understandably, caused an absolute wildfire across the footballing world, particularly on social media. Fans, pundits, and countless athletes spoke up about how Greenwood should never see the light of day for the rest of his career, let alone the football pitch. There were multiple reports of United staff prepared to quit or go on strike should the Englishman return to Old Trafford. During this turbulent time for the club, the United board held a crisis meeting to monitor the public's reaction to the news. And after what I can only imagine was something that looked like an episode of Celebrities Read Mean Tweets, the board came out of the crisis meeting having made a full 180 on Greenwood's future. At the end of the day, the decision wasn't a sudden change of heart from the board. It was, and always is, about money for them. They believed that Greenwood's talent could help them secure trophies, increase viewership, and attract investors. That's why they even considered Greenwood's return, despite the horribly glaring evidence put out against him for the whole world to see. But after monitoring the public's reaction to the possibility of his return, things changed rapidly. Although Greenwood increased their chances of lifting trophies, and the influx of cash that comes with that, they would be losing millions of fans worldwide, sponsors, and popular figures in the process. They came to the very calculated conclusion that the money lost from Greenwood's return would outweigh the financial benefits, and just like that, Greenwood's fate was sealed. Although this wasn't the right reasoning, at all, they did begrudgingly come to the right decision, and credit needs to go to the fans, social justice organizations, and their women's team for speaking out against Greenwood and the club's handling of the situation. The Englishman was loaned out to Getafe for a season, then was bought up by Marseille for 26 million euros in 2024. Marseille's mayor, Benoit Payan, called the move a disgrace. And now, here we are today, in a really confusing situation. Mason Greenwood finished top scorer in Ligue 1 last season, level with Ballon d'Or winning Ousmane Dembele, and he leads the race this season as well. People to this day seem to either be defending him or have just completely forgotten about his past and chose to move on. Even the most established platforms and some of the biggest faces of football have stayed silent. It's an eerie, perplexing time to be a football fan, where even Fabrizio Romano, the biggest reporter in football, is posting AI-generated images of Greenwood holding the Ballon d'Or. It's almost like the Mandela effect, like we entered some alternate timeline where Greenwood didn't commit these horrible crimes, but that's just how extensive the propaganda behind him has been. Ligue 1 has been posting this guy like it's his personal account, yet they haven't made any response to their comment sections being flooded with outrage, and Greenwood's woman-hating keyboard gang grasping at straws to defend him.
I can't believe that United let him go, all because of some feminists that said he would be bad for the club. Doesn't everyone deserve a second chance? Damn.
There are people in prison for decades for what he's done, and he's not only free, but still playing football in the south of France on a 22 million euro contract. This is the second chance, and then some. Nasri commented on the situation.
If she has forgiven him, who are we to judge? That's the point.
Her response to this is her own decision, even though it was likely swayed via manipulation or bribery. This doesn't make him any less of an abuser. If you murder someone, you are a murderer. Just because the victim's mother may find it in her heart to forgive you, that doesn't undo the horrible act you've committed. You're using a victim's fragile and complicated situation as ammunition to support your own lack of empathy and bias in wanting to see Mason Greenwood play for England.
The kid deserves a second chance to get on with his career. We all make mistakes.
Calling your teacher mom is a mistake. Missing an open goal is a mistake. Repeatedly physically and sexually assaulting a woman is not a mistake. It's a horrific and conscious decision that only a terrible human being would do. Decisions that Mason Greenwood clearly made repeatedly throughout their relationship without remorse. And unfortunately, Mason Greenwood's situation isn't uncommon in football, and all sports for that matter. There's a relationship between how good or valuable a player is to their franchise and what they can get away with from a legal, and more importantly, moral perspective. There are many parallels between European football and American football when it comes to this matter. Both sports have multiple sexual and physical assault charges come to light each season, with most of them being pushed under the rug. The news spreads quickly, influencers talk about it for a few weeks at most, and then, depending on how good the player is, or how popular they are, they'll face a range of comically inconsequential punishments. Don't believe me? Let's take a look at a couple of examples. Ray Rice was a prolific Super Bowl winning running back for the Baltimore Ravens, but his legacy was destroyed when TMZ obtained and released a video of him assaulting his wife in an elevator. Similar to Greenwood, this was a bomb that took the internet by storm, as it was damning, irrefutable evidence of a serious felony. And just like that, the 28-year-old running back's career was over. He was dropped by the Ravens and never saw the field again. I think that, unfortunately, his age and position on the field played a factor in this. A running back's career in the NFL lasts just 2.5 years on average, the shortest of any position in the game. At 28 years old, Rice's best output was behind him at this point, and the decline of running backs is a harsh one, considering the amount of hits and injuries they endure. I need to make sure to mention that of course he should be forced into retirement after this video is released, if not much worse. But there's an argument to be made that the Ravens and the NFL may have tried harder in searching for loopholes to keep the running back around, especially since, similar to Greenwood's case, the charges were eventually dropped, for whatever reason that may be. Because, as I mentioned earlier, there's a definitive relationship between how valuable a player is to a franchise and what they're able to get away with. Let's take a look at another notable example, former Steelers quarterback Ben Roethlisberger. Similar to Ray Rice, Roethlisberger faced multiple serious assault allegations between 2008 and 2010. This included the rape of an employee at the Lake Tahoe Hotel, and then the assault of a 20-year-old woman in a nightclub bathroom. But unlike Ray Rice, a running back who was likely on his way out in the next couple of years regardless, Roethlisberger was a 26-year-old quarterback under a $100 million contract. He still had over a decade ahead of him and was the face of a massive NFL franchise. Unfortunately, this is the NFL, NFL, where highly paid quarterbacks can get away with a lot. Simply put, the quarterback is the most important player on the field, and there are only so many talented arms in the league. Roethlisberger was one of the best. And this is why the worst punishment the Pittsburgh quarterback would face for his disgusting acts of violence was a 4-match suspension. That's the same fate that Tom Brady suffered for slightly deflating footballs before games. And to this day, Big Ben's legacy seems untainted by these attacks, and it's hard to imagine a world in which Greenwood doesn't receive similar treatment. This is what the future holds for Mason Greenwood. Being a young, talented footballer who has a whole career ahead of him, he faced a mere slap on the wrist for his vile actions. And as time goes on, and he continues to improve as a prolific attacker, more people will seem to forget about Greenwood's complicated past, if not defend him. As for his future with England, well, that remains a mystery. With Tuchel facing pressure to lift major trophies with the Three Lions, who knows what may happen. When asked about Greenwood leading into the 2026 World Cup, Tuchel said that Greenwood was not in the mix at the moment. At the moment. Because, just like the rest of these clubs, the English national team is a business. A business built on winning. And it's hard not to believe that if Greenwood continues to get better, his past will become foggier. And he may just pass that thin line that would lead to him representing England once more. Everyone has a price.